From our experience, we spend around 7 terabytes. So that means
Okay, well, we're still kind of figuring that out, but in the meantime, I will start. Mirror my screen. There we go. Okay, so this is about Google Apps Script, but I wanted to talk about it sort of through the way that I became acquainted with it, which was building our own service request system at the business school. So can I just get a show of hands? Does everyone know what Google Apps Script is? Okay, so only a few people. So I'm sure you've all used Google Apps before, Google Docs, Google Sheets, Gmail. These are very popular web apps from Google. And Google Apps Script is basically a programming environment, an integration environment that sort of sits underneath all of these web apps and tools that we're familiar with, and allows you to integrate them and write scripts to use them and create add-ons and do a lot of cool things. So yeah, this is kind of the blurb that they have on their website. Increase the power of your favorite Google apps. App Script lets you do more with Google, all on a JavaScript platform in the cloud. So you get to use a very popular web programming language to basically do anything you would be able to do with JavaScript to integrate these applications, and they offer a lot of, anything you can do through the browser, you can also do it through scripting, and I'll show you how I use that to build our own service request system. So for us, the problem in our organization at the business school, we're called Digital Media Solutions, and we are about a 5-person full-time team, and we have about 5 other contractors. We're in charge of all the audio-visual services at the GSB, about 120 rooms. We work with faculty, staff, and students to help them out with video shoots, class capture, remote learning sessions, and a lot of technology setups. So in a given month, we might receive anywhere from 20 to 30 requests from our users for the services that we offer. Before we had this system, we were receiving these requests through phone calls, walk-ins, emails, and things like that. And there was really no bird's eye view of all the requests, and there was no template for what information to gather. So there would be a lot of back and forth for each request, trying to gather more information, and things would change, and it was just not able to be managed in one place. So that was a problem, and it would take up a lot of time, and we would have to manually copy information from, let's say, email to the calendar, or from listening to it on the phone to putting it into a spreadsheet, and it was just sort of a fractured system. So with the system we created, and I'll go through this quickly because I want to give time for questions, and if you guys have any things you want to do in your organization, I want to hear about that, and maybe I can give you some ideas. But here's the basic workflow for what we're doing today with this custom service request system that we built using this free Google Apps Script that all of you in this room have access to just by having a Google account. Oops. Okay, somebody has taken control.
Yeah, the one from remote about to see the screen.
Oh,
Share
okay.
the screen. Yeah,
And,
go share screen.
Share
Yeah.
screen. This will stop other screen sharing. Okay. Continue. That's weird because that's not. Oh, here we go.
I would just do the desktop because then you can switch to it.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
actually-
Okay.
that's
Share screen.
true.
Okay. Cool. Hopefully that is working. Yeah, looks like it is. So one of our customers, users, clients would go to our website within the GSB. There's me. There's my boss standing somewhere in the back. And here's our button saying, request support. So first of all, a lot of this was a programming, development effort, but a lot of it is we have to stop taking requests through the phone, through email. If someone comes in those ways, we need to funnel them here so that all requests can come through this system, and that's really what a lot of the success of this is dependent on, so that we can get everything under one point of management. So from here, they would come to this form, and they would fill out a form. I don't want to go through it because it would take up too much time, but it's a standard set of information we gather for each request. We build this through Google Forms, and it gathers all the information we need to know to sort of triage it and then follow up with them. From there, I pre-filled one out so that we can see what it looks like. So once you fill out a request, you receive a confirmation email. And this is made possible by Google Apps Script. You can set up triggers based on certain events that happen within Google Apps. So when you use Google Forms, you press the submit button. You can create a trigger based on that would then use the Gmail interface to send out a custom confirmation email. And that's what that's doing here. You can see event title, James Test IT Unconference, what services, when it's starting, primary contact. So this is all the information so that the client knows they filled it out correctly, and also we all kind of have it on record. They're confident that it's in our system, and it happens automatically, so it saves a lot of time, the back and forth, and having to reassure people that they're in the system. So once it would be submitted, then it would come to our dashboard here. And Dream all used Google Sheets. So
Is that the spreadsheet that's created by the form?
So that's a great question. Thank you for asking. This is actually just sort of a mirror of the actual spreadsheet I can show you. So I just call it our service request database. All of the requests actually go here, but I don't want all of the people in our organization having access to sort of the raw data, because let's say they accidentally delete something and reformat it and problems can occur. So one of the key things for this custom solution was creating this dashboard, which, as you can see, all of these are locked so that it's really view only. So they would come to the dashboard, and this one I actually already scheduled, but
Is an action script that you use to populate this?
another good question. So this is using just actually functions from Google Spreadsheets, and it's basically an import. So you can import data from another spreadsheet, and that's how this data is getting from the default spreadsheet that gets populated by Google Forms and gets to the dashboard. And basically you just punch in the URL of the spreadsheet that you want to import into another spreadsheet, and then it would just basically populate it like this. And you can also use some sort of SQL-like language to say which columns you want and other things. So that's how I created the read-only interface for the data that our sort of logistics people would use.
I think, excuse me, I think probably the question was how the data flows from the form into.
Is it all the time, or is there a cron job? I'm sorry, if it's
Right.
going through and triggering like twice a day?
Yeah, this is live. So anytime. So to answer your question, when someone submits a form, that's just part of how Google Forms works. Is that it will automatically populate to a spreadsheet of your choosing. And so it takes all of the questions that you have. Let's say you have first name, last name, date, and service requested. It'll create 4 columns in a spreadsheet. First name, last name, date, and then services. It automatically populates the data in a new row every time someone submits a form. So then when that happens, here, you can see all these rows here. I have a ton of, we have a pretty big form just because we request a lot of data. When this happens, then it automatically gets entered into the bottom here. Here's our newest ones. This is the one that I just submitted. So that automatically goes here, and then with the import range function of Google Sheets, and I can go over that further offline, just specifically how to do that if someone wants a further tutorial. But that is live data, so I don't have to sort of re-enter that every time I want to or refresh it. Google is just constantly doing that for me. If a request were to come in right now, it would populate into this dashboard. So with those tools, they make it really seamless just to create a dashboard and do that. The next big piece of this is that once we have a request here, you can create a custom menu using AppScript and write functions in JavaScript and create a menu item out of them. So here's basically the app and all the scripts that go into it. And you can write a function that does some stuff with Gmail or Sheets or triggers and whatnot. And then you're basically creating a user interface for yourself or whoever would be using the system. And with my system that we created, with our system, you click on a request, come into our digital, our custom menu basically, and say schedule the request. I won't do this because this is our actual live system. But what that would do is fire another trigger. The client would get another email saying your request has been scheduled, so that they know, they're confident. They also would get, it would pop up in their calendar. So they don't have to call us asking if it's in their system. They have a record of it, we have a record of it. They would get a URL right here they can click on, and all that same data is getting populated in here. So there's no copying and pasting and trying to keep things updated in different systems. So this was great for us because we had kind of custom needs. There's no app out there that we could just buy that would do this for us. So being able to tweak it on the fly and kind of shape it to our needs was really helpful, and we learned a lot about just how any kind of service request workflow should work along the way. And we learned a lot about our own organization in terms of what services we offer, getting them on paper, on form, how people interact with our services and what questions they have, and it's been a really good learning process. So with that said, I just want to open it up to questions of any type. Let's see if I have anything else here. Yeah, this is just kind of a simple diagram that might help, but it starts out in Google Forms, and those rows underneath, those are different service types that we offer. People can do either a single event or they can set up a recurring event through that form. That would go into that Google Sheets, the initial one, which is like the database. The dashboard over here is the read-only sort of mirror of the database. that, you know, our logistics person uses to actually, or people use to actually create the events and interact with them. And then, you know, when they schedule something, it automatically goes into Google Calendar. And the beauty of the whole AppScript ecosystem is that it's really easy to interface it with any third-party service out there. I mean, there's all kinds of cool things you can do. We're starting to sort of build that out. For instance, we have classroom recording systems in a handful of rooms, and they just so happen to have an interface with Google Calendar. So whereas before we would have to, every time we got a request, go into Google Calendar, go into their system and manually enter details for recording and you know, enter the person's information and the description and the metadata. Now, this classroom recording system just pulls it from our Google Calendar, which is automatically created from the request. So it's pretty much a seamless workflow from customer request to your classroom recording has been set up automatically. And you know, there's lots of other interfaces you can create because it's a really versatile system. Yeah.
So as you guys were learning this, what was your biggest source of support?
Right. Support is in sort of how we would learn to do new things, or learn about the customers, or
Like you wanted to discover what third-party services integrate with
Oh, okay, yeah.
Calendar? Is there
that's a great
I
question.
would imagine you'd go to Google, but
Right.
did you find other communities or other sources, other groups
Yeah,
that
I
you
mean,
found particularly helpful?
my two biggest, you know, our two biggest resources were the AppScript documentation itself. It's really comprehensive. You can start out with just a guide, if you just want a 5-minute quick start, or go straight into the reference and you can see, okay, for Google Calendar, you know, how does this work? What's available to me? What methods are available? And it's, you know, it's a really user-friendly programming interface. So you could literally right now open a Google spreadsheet, and within 5 minutes you could be sort of reading data from the spreadsheet and sending an email based on it. There's nothing you have to install. It's pretty much as simple as you go to Sheets, click on a new spreadsheet, and then to get to the programming environment, if you want to start playing around with it, just go into Tools, and then Script Editor. And it's basically, I mean, it'll create a script that's bound to your document. So you don't have to create any database interface or any of this complicated setup. It's just pretty much automatic, it's free, and you know, you can do anything as simple as you know, creating new spreadsheet documents based on emails people would send you or something like that, or you can go ahead and do something much more complicated, like creating a whole system you might use.
You said you had two sources, I'm sorry, you said one.
Oh, sorry, yeah, that was you know, just the documentation itself, and then also just Stack Exchange, Stack Overflow. There's tons of examples on there, like any specific question you might have, like how do you, or like you just type in, you know, send emails from spreadsheet data, Google AppScript, and there will be examples and tutorials based on specifically that. So for me, that's exactly how I sort of, you know, learned how to do it.
So it looks like this is JavaScript.
Yes.
But can you switch between different programming languages?
Unfortunately,
And how can you load the data, or that it understands what's the data you are talking about?
yeah, so unfortunately one of the restrictions is they only allow you to program for Google AppScript in JavaScript, as far as I know of. Unlike many of the other Google APIs out there where you can use Python, Java, you know, Ruby, anything out there. For this, it's, you know, this is your programming environment, so the compiler or whatever, the editor only understands JavaScript. But in terms of the data, I mean, so if, let's, you know, we wanted to go, type in test here. The way it understands the data is, oops. So it has great autocomplete. So you just go in and type spreadsheet app. You would get the active spreadsheet. You would, in fact, we can do it if you want to. Get active spreadsheet. Let's see, get range. A1 notation, we'll do A1 dot get value, and then we can do log. Okay. Now let's see. That should log. We'll say JavaScript. And then if we run my function, so another thing is any services you use, you have to authorize because you're giving AppScript access to your data. So I have to authorize this because it's accessing my spreadsheet data. Okay, sure. What do I do?
Go to advanced, or go on.
Advanced.
Do the unsafe option.
There we go. Love unsafe option. Okay. Okay. JavaScript. So it was that easy, just to, like one line, just to read data from, and you can script this, use for loops, push that into email. So it's really user-friendly, easy. Any other questions? Yeah, what'd you, in the black shirt?
Did you evaluate using ServiceNow or anything like that, like joining with the UIT service?
We did, yeah. That was definitely a big discussion. We actually were already developing this when ServiceNow was rolled out to the GSB. And you know, as the rollout progresses for ServiceNow, I think they're going to start offering some really cool advanced custom forms and user interfaces, but unfortunately for the data gathering requirements that we had for our types of services, ServiceNow at the GSB, we couldn't customize it to gather the type of data in the data types that we needed that could be pushed into Google Calendar, and all these integrations that we had gotten used to. We would have, you know, gone back in time if we had to switch over to ServiceNow. So maybe I think once it progresses a bit, we might be able to switch over. But for now, you know, we've got this really great seamless workflow.
And it's just 5 of you. So
What's that?
It's just 5 of you, right? So
Yeah.
a big team.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so my teams have been using something very similar to this. Apple script to do, or sorry, Google script to do a lot of the stuff with regards to Excel and stuff. We're limited because we're not part of GSB. Our email isn't going directly through Gmail.
Oh, I see.
So that's a big limitation, I think, for email and calendaring, maybe for the majority of the rest of the school. Our workaround for that is there's a Microsoft product called Flow we have access to,
Okay.
which has a few more features, but also has limitations thereof. But we've been able to integrate that with Slack and stuff. So instead of
Okay.
sending emails directly through Gmail, which would have been really nice and cakey,
Right.
we're having to go through the Microsoft route and use Flow. But it also allows us to send messages in Slack, including GIFs or whatever, and do the same logging functions. But it may be worthwhile if you're exploring this and get hung up on the email side of things or the calendar
Yeah,
side.
that is a restriction because I know most of the university uses Outlook, and we're still on Google Apps at the GSB. But it sounds like so you guys use AppScript for some things, but for the email part, you have to go out and use Flow.
Yeah, we're just using it for manipulation of generally the sheet stuff, and then we're using it to set off some triggers that are triggered in Flow,
Nice.
which work out.
Okay,
So.
great. Any other questions? Yeah.
So can you access other systems outside of the Google sphere? You know, do a call to, get data from someplace else and populate spreadsheet using that?
Yeah, you can. So there's a URL fetch.
Okay.
That's one way of doing it. That basically, if there's a REST API or web data that you want to download, you can fetch it using a URL fetch and parse it in some way, and then populate a spreadsheet. Actually, yeah, we use that for part of the system to populate some of our. We have like 300 faculty or professors and lecturers at the GSB, and we want people to be able to use a list of sort of picking who's teaching the class, and so we use that to sort of get the current list of
Is that
faculty.
from Explore Courses?
What's that?
Where did you get that from, Explore Courses, or?
Actually, we had to. I just had to get it from our GSB.Stanford IEDU because I didn't have access to the Explore Courses database. But
It has an XML.
oh, is it? Okay. I might have to look into that. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
What's the classroom recording system that you're using that's pulling from Google?
Yeah, that is called Winov. Yeah, so we have those in about, I think 10.
We have 3 recorders.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we have 3 recorders, but we have the capabilities are in about 10 to 12 different rooms with infrastructure that's built in over fiber and cameras. So yeah, they've been good about working with us to manage that interface, and it's gotten better. And we haven't had really any big problems with it. It just basically it uses the kind of private link. You can share calendars using a private link, so it'll take that link and download the iCal data every 60 seconds, and basically if it sees a new event in there, it'll create a recording kind of based on metadata that you can put into the calendar event.
So James kind of touched on this, but what he just briefly discussed has been a huge integration, and we worked with Winov directly. They've been very supportive as far as developing that integration. We use 3 centralized recorders between a dozen rooms, so there's some juggling going on with the Google App script, which is pretty cool. So that little script that James wrote will first, if you tell it to turn this event into a recording on one of the recorders, first it'll go out and see which recorders are available, then it'll actually assign it to the next available recorder, and then insert it in the calendar, and then the next request that comes along, it'll be able to see that recorder is already being used at this time, and to go to the next one down. So then when the people who actually implement the recording and make it happen, because there's a lot of manual stuff that has to happen, they know exactly which recorder to use, how all the routing has to happen and everything. So that's one of the neatest things I think that you developed, was being able to juggle that, because it was extremely manual before, and sometimes we would overcommit the recorders. So now we'll know if all 3 of them are committed to something during a time period. So yeah, that part is really cool.
Yeah, and since each of our recorders has its own calendar, we could just use the again Google App Script. It has a function available to check the sort of free busy of other calendars, and we can see which one is free at this particular block of time, and pick one that is free, or if none of them are free, an alert would come up for our scheduling person saying there's no available time for recording right now. So that sort of prevent a lot of headaches for us. And this is kind of just the metadata that it would look at. This is an example of one of those, just automatically populated. Yeah.
How do you handle errors? So calendar schedule happens, then it tries to do the scheduling with a video recording, and that fails. How do you handle that?
That's a good question. So errors are a very tough part of it, but I mean, with good programming practices, you can handle errors right inside of AppScript using try, catch, finally kind of syntax to if there are parts where you might encounter errors or other things, you can catch them there and then handle it in some way by maybe sending an email if something's error out, or you can use different dialog boxes that can come up that we use. This isn't an error, but just to give you an example, you can bring up dialog boxes in the interface that might say, no recorder available, or this recording didn't work for some reason, and sort of provide data through the try, catch, finally syntax. So that's kind of how I've handled it, and sometimes there are uncaught errors, at least not through your program, that Google will actually send you emails if something kind of fails in the background. And there's also really great logging and error handling or error reporting just built into Google Apps Script. So we can go to error reporting or logging, and it's basically using the infrastructure of a Google Cloud platform that you would get if you were spooling up a regular virtual machine to sort of look at these errors, and you can go in there and oh, I'm seeing this error is happening again and again. I probably need to build in some kind of way to handle that within my program. Any other questions? Yeah.
Okay. For Google Apps Scripts, this is like the first time I've actually seen it demonstrated the code JavaScript.
Cool.
And you're tying it into various G Suite applications.
Right.
I was wondering, to make calendar events, to create them, delete them, modify them, is it possible to tie in third-party Google apps, much less like desktop applications? The reason why I ask is there's this mind mapping application called MindMap on the cloud, but also Free Plane or Free Mind on the desktop. I've really liked how it does the mind mapping, but I've always dreamed I could integrate this with Google Calendar. And I was wondering, is there a way to do that with Google Apps Scripts?
Right. So.
Or do I need to make an iCal type file or something?
It would depend on how this desktop software was developed.
MindMap, which is kind of proprietary with a paid tier. And it's,
Right. I don't know if you would be able to do a direct interface between those two, but if it's open source or you're able to develop on it at all, you could certainly have it write data from that desktop application to a Google Calendar using the either the
one-way import.
Yeah, one-way import. Yeah, I mean, I would have to sort of know more about it.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if you would need to use Google Apps Script for that. You might just be able to use the Google Calendar API.
Okay.
If you were just going to use it with your own account, or
I wonder. I mean, like for mind mapping, I'd have to structure it in such a way that if I broke the structure, it'd be brittle. But I'm wondering, to what degree it can be the mind map right to Google Calendar, and then if you can do inverse, that'd be great. But I have no idea about that.
So
like
the
modify
Google
the
Calendar would write into the
modify the mind map as well.
Yeah, we should email about it.
Yeah,
we
cool.
can look into it. Any other questions? I think we might be.
I have a couple pretty granular questions.
Oh, sure.
So, in your email, that confirmation email when they fill out the form, you have the link that enables them to edit their responses.
Yes.
But it says only until scheduled. So does your script actually, when it changes to scheduled, does it disable the editing option?
It does. Yeah, it does. Which has been really helpful because we wanted to open up the ability for people, because that's a great feature of Google Forms, is that you can go back to a form, change your response, and then resubmit it, and it'll update the data for you.
But at some point you want to not?
At some point, yeah. If it's like an hour before the event, you can't have people changing things and be like, oh, we ordered 2 more cameras. I was like, well, you did that an hour before the event.
So the script actually changes?
Yeah, so...
and just that's part of your script process?
That's part of the script process.
Whatever that
that was using a bit, that was actually is more of a recent thing that I did, but it's there's sort of a content service that Google Apps Script allows you to do, where you can provide a clickable URL for someone to click on the URL and access data in your spreadsheet or somewhere else. And so basically, once they click on that URL in the email, it'll check how much time is before the event, and if it's within 24 hours, then the browser will say, sorry.
Okay.
So it's something like that.
Okay.
You said you had a second?
Yeah, the second question is, if someone's filling out that form, well, one step back, so I assume that since it's all in Google, if it's capturing the user, that's how it captures their calendar ID, and that's how it creates all these things, like to put things on their calendar. But if
Exactly.
someone's filling out the form on behalf of someone else, is there an option to say, actually, I'm filling this out for my faculty, but I don't need it in my calendar, I want it in theirs, or put it in both? Like, is it, are you that
Yes.
nuanced in the?
Yeah, so on the form itself, you can actually say, so if I were filling this out, it's going to capture me as the submitter,
Mhm.
and it'll automatically go to my calendar,
Right.
the event. But you can put someone else for the primary contact. Like I could put the faculty member's information here, their first name, last name, email address, telephone number. Then they would also get the invite for the event. And you can also submit, I just put this in because sometimes people want a secondary contact.
Mhm.
They would also invite them as a guest. And you could do that ad infinitum. Basically just all of these people that they're entering as contacts, invite them to the calendar event that AppScript creates and sends out.
So it'll create a calendar event, and then it'll send invitations based on those secondary contacts?
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So does it based on the email address you enter here, or whoever does it capture your login from when you actually started filling out the form? Which
It does
take?
both.
Both, okay.
It does both. So it'll automatically, by default, it'll send it to mine because I'm the submitter, because Google Forms just always captures, well,
Right.
depending on a setting. in
You
Google
can,
Forms.
yeah.
Exactly. Okay, you know,
Yeah.
you know what you're talking about. So yeah, you can capture the username. It'll capture that. It'll automatically add them because we figure if you submitted it, I want it to be on your calendar because you're clearly the interface,
Right.
you know, between who you're filling it out for. And then you can additionally add 2 more people that it'll just add to the guest list.
Okay.
And it'll create it, you know, on we're the sort of the creator of the event as Digital Media Solutions, but
Right.
we're inviting them as guests.
Okay, that's perfect, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right, well, thanks a lot for coming, guys. Thanks for the good session. And also, let me just put my email address up here. I think I'd like to start a community of practice, or if anyone wants to email, I'm thinking about making this sort of open so that anyone could use this. I'd like to develop it a bit so that you could just sort of configure it and create your own service request system if you wanted to. So let me put my information real quick.
That's a really good idea.
Please, if you want to hear more about this or just have any specific questions, email me and I'd be happy to chat further. I just came from another presentation. I was doing my bachelor's.
Oh, you were here? Yeah. I was like, just, it's like, I think what's the name there?
Exactly.
I spoke to Jermaine later on. She was like, Dimitri. Like, yeah, I was kind of a data dumb. Like, sorry. It probably should have been like Emacs packages, but I thought that
It
was
was something like that, and it was like, you know, so you can focus on just like a couple of features.
Okay.
Then more, it's like literally a deep discussion.
Yeah, no. It's like, if I just did mobile packages in my Emacs config, like, that would be much more.
Were you moderating?
Easy. I mean,
Yeah, we haven't.
I haven't done that.
Oh, okay.
I just decided to stick with one.
Are you Neo Bundle, Bundle Packaging, or Fimplug?
I actually don't use any of those. I'm a pretty
What?
simple user.
Okay, so
I
you
just
use
use like,
MRC.
yeah,
Like,
Vim
MRC.
RC, yeah, that's my go-to.
I have a friend that's like that, but he uses Control P.
But some of the stuff you were doing looks pretty powerful and interesting, so
I
it was
like
piquing my interest.
Mag it a lot. I mean, I don't like the pronunciation of it if it's like a club. Match it.
It does sound.
But old mode I haven't really delved into, but I don't know, I feel like in some ways using Eagle mode key bindings,
Yeah.
like so much is built for Emacs key bindings, I'm not taking full advantage of it. So,
Interesting.
but I do like Emacs a lot. But
Yeah, it looks pretty cool. Yeah, I was just curious, was that recorded?
Yeah, it's through the whole station.
Oh, okay, and so we'll be able to watch it afterwards?
I don't know that it's
Oh.
probably going to
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. Thanks for your help.
No idea.
So it was Artifact. Nice to meet you.
Great presentation.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Really great to work.
You didn't tell them how long it's taken.
That's irrelevant.
Oh,
Well,
I'm just curious.
it's been, I mean, there's been various sort of different releases of features, but it's been over the course of, what, a year and a half?
Many iterations, yeah. Plus some learning curve, but
Lots of
yeah,
learning curve,
lots of
absolutely.
learning curve and
I
lots
mean,
of.
initially, it was just, we had a form that populated the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And that was like the basic functionality we had, and we would just, at least we had all the requests on one spreadsheet.
We had a mandate to start gathering data on all the work that we were doing. 'Cause before that, it was just the wild, wild west. You know, we would call up, we would just do anything. Nothing was ever documented. And so then they wanted to get some reports on what we were spending all our time doing and why it was costing all this money. So this was the solution James came up
I
with.
mean,
It's
this was it to get to this place.
I mean, since we started kind of developing on this, it's been like 18 months.
Well,
But it's been, I mean, it's been
yeah.
being used the entire time.
Yeah.
So wasn't like,
Keep getting better and better.
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Plus user feedback, like that secondary contact thing, that was an ad. There were been a lot of things like that. And then the consistency of data. So the free-form fields were a problem because people were just entering any old thing for, say, the professor name.
Right.
Or even the room number there was inconsistency.
Professor 205.
In the room number, as they couldn't even get those consistently done. So when we tried to do data analysis, it was full of
Nonsense.
Messy data, yeah.
data.
So the data validation was.
So you've been able to add a lot of data validation through this scripting.
I'm just curious, how would you do data visualization? Do you use D3 on top of this?
We use,
Within,
was it
Tableau.
Tableau.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not us personally, but we have, as part of our IT, greater IT organization, we have some database people, they use Tableau.
I think in the mornings, that's all. They have more cities out.
It's not real
Yeah, they all
time.
have cities.
Well, actually, so
Because I actually did a
recently,
presentation and
I was able to create a real-time, yeah, all of our data.
That's fine.
Yes,
And within the JavaScript.
No, which ones are recorded?
Oh, well, actually,
they're all
so hold on.
recorded.
They're all recorded.
Yeah.
We
You
made
can they're all
available
recorded. They're all
real-time, live look of all of our data for the data
That they can
science.
import in
I have those
Tableau.
notes.
Yeah, I think they do have
I
to,
know, this is all.
Ad
Takes
hoc.
a stamp.
I think she has to ad hoc
Which means-
pull it and put it into Tableau, but there might be a way for
Oh, you had
Tableau to
a
read it
speech.
live
Yeah.
Oh, we
from
sure.
a Google spreadsheet.
I just don't think we're doing that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be interesting.
That would be
How do I
good.
connect? I did not even know it was recorded.
We recorded that, I work with it, yeah, we recorded, but I don't know where they're gonna go.
Okay, maybe Jonathan, nice to meet you.
Oh, that's.
Yeah, I
Sure.
it was fun. I didn't really want to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a city mic on, and then all recording.
Yeah, I'm doing data now.
And here, here is for the people.
Yeah, I mean, if,
Okay.
I was trying
Yeah.
to figure out a way through this too, so that someone else could sort of, basically in Google Apps Script, you could also use libraries of like someone else's code. So I wanted a way to just be able to take the library from their organization's information and kind of create their own system.
QIN, okay. So you assume that's probably like something.
Yeah, if you're experienced with that,
Yeah,
well,
see,
it'd
everyone
be
has
cool
a
if we could
CGI.
figure out a way
Oh,
to
okay.
make that.
Yeah, it's interconnection. Yeah, don't,
We're not Tableau experts, but we know.
Also, soon as.
I use that.
I'll have questions about audio.
I never, I'm sure that is.
There's got to be, yeah, because there's multiple ways to get data out of Google Sheets, and I'm sure there's multiple ways to get data into Tableau. So.
Sure. I'll tell you later about the use case for mind mapping. I used to enjoy for maybe 2 or so years. I used to make mind map that had like the month and the days, and I would do the activity. Like this is Monday, I have a node, and then I would sometimes move it later on. And it was great because for mind maps you can collapse the node, so it doesn't look as intimidating. But there was no like calendar integration, much less if I modify a calendar, it modifies back the nodes. So I'll take some screenshots and I'll email them to you.
Yeah, there's probably a way. I mean, yeah, there's ways you can do all that with triggers and
I mean, it's
stuff like
free
that.
find and free mind are on source storage. It's really open source. So I just don't know the format, like API or whatever, ICAL or whatever. So
Yeah.
I've always wondered that I integrate Google Calendar with MindMap, but
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Either through the Google, through the calendar API or
Yeah.
through the, or through apps